Whenever we are talking about the motility of stomach, the first thing we need to understand is this: there are multiple factors associated with this particular topic. This is our stomach. Okay. Now, what is this? This is what? This spring is what? Actually, there is no spring. Obviously, you know that, right? Thank God. This is what? Again, this spring is. This is upper esophageal sphincter. This is lower esophageal sphincter, right? Now, listen with all your attention. Suppose this is a food bolus. Okay. Now listen. Suppose this is a food bolus which is about to enter stomach. Now, before we discuss the stomach part, you must understand that inside the stomach there is another spring here. There is another spring here. Okay. That is, there is another sphincter here. Okay. So in total, up to this stage, we have discussed three springs or three sphincter muscle. That is upper esophageal sphincter. Okay. Then it is lower esophageal sphincter. Okay. Lower esophageal sphincter. Okay. And this one, the latest addition to our spring addition, this one is called, this one is known by the name of this one is called pyloric sphincter. This one is called pyloric sphincter. Okay. So this is called upper esophageal sphincter, this is called lower esophageal sphincter, and this is called pyloric sphincter. Okay. Now listen, now listen with all your attention. You know that stomach is actually divisible into three main areas, right? Three main areas, right? Now what are these? The first area is called fundus, right? The first area is called fundus. And this is the body. Okay. This is the body of the stomach, and this is antrum. Now listen with all your attention possible. This is called antrum. Okay. Now the lower end of the antrum, that means this area. Okay. That means where the antrum opens. Okay. This area is known by the name of what? Pylorus. It is called pylorus. Now, as this spring is present, or this sphincter muscle is present in the pylorus area, that's why it is called pyloric sphincter. Okay. Clear? Now, the most important point you need to understand if you want to study motility of stomach, that is 50% of the stomach, that is the upper half. 50% of the stomach, that is the upper half, that is fundus plus a portion of the body. This 50% of the stomach helps in storage of the food until and unless it is passed into the small intestine. This 50%, this portion helps in storage of food. Okay. Storage of food. Clear? Storage of food. And this lower 50%, is actually helping in, now I will have to draw like this because I can't show you. Now this lower 50% actually helps in mixing of food with gastric secretion. Clear? Mixing of food with gastric secretion. Okay, that means the 50%, the upper 50%, the upper 50% almost helps in storage of food. Okay, the upper 50% of stomach helps in storage of food, but this lower 50% actually helps in mixing of the food. Okay, clear? Now very important point here we need to understand is this, that what do you mean by this storage of food and all these things. Okay, we'll be discussing right now. Now listen, I will not be drawing the upper esophageal sphincter area and most of the esophagus. I will be start drawing from the second spring area, that is I will be start drawing from the second area. Clear? Okay, so this is our first spring. Okay, so this is our first spring area. Let me rub this because I need this space. Okay, so this is our first spring, that is the first sphincter muscle. Now listen with all your attention possible. This is our first spring. Okay, clear? Now listen with all your attention. Suppose this is your food bolus. Okay, suppose this is your food bolus. Now a very important point you need to understand when you are considering this, that when this food bolus will now try to enter our stomach, when this food bolus will try to enter the stomach, now the first thing is this food bolus will be welcomed by this 50%, right? Will be welcomed by the 50%, right? Will be welcomed by the 50%, right? And the rest of the 50% of stomach will be used in mixing of this food particle with acids and other enzymes, right? Now the important point you need to understand is this, for the food particle to come into this stomach, we must understand that this spring should stretch. This spring should stretch. That means this spring should loosen, right? This spring should lose. This spring will have to lose. This spring will have to lose, right? The spring will have to lose. This is the first thing, the spring will have to lose. Okay, now the very important point here you need to understand is this. Now obviously this spring is, or this particular sphincter muscle, that is lower esophageal sphincter, is actually loosened because of what? Because of many neurons releasing vasoactive intestinal peptide or nitric oxide. We already know that. Now important point we need to understand is this. What about this? Now listen, when the food is coming from here to here, suppose this is region number 1. Okay, suppose this is region number 1. Okay, suppose this is region number 1. Okay, and suppose this is region number 2. Suppose food is coming from region number 1 to region number 2. The first thing we need to understand is this, that when the food will come from region number 1 to region number 2, the first thing is this, that the region number 1 should have a low pressure area, and region number 2, the region number 1 should have a high pressure area, and region number 2 should have a low pressure area, right? Now our body has a constant temperature of 37 degrees Celsius, right? Now apply Boyle's law. Apply Boyle's law. Clear? Apply Boyle's law. That means if temperature remaining constant, then pressure is inversely proportional to volume. That means, now listen with all your attention possible. So in this region number 1, in this region number 1, pressure should be high or low? Pressure should be high or low? High. And in this region number 2, pressure should be low, right? Now, why I am telling this? Now listen. If we want to increase the pressure in this, first area, then what we will have to do? If we want to increase the pressure, we will have to decrease what? Volume. That means this area right now should contract, right? This area right now should contract, so that due to this peristaltic wave, the food is pressurized to enter this area, because already the spring has loosened. Already the spring has loosened, right? Already the spring has loosened. Therefore, this food particle should come here. Now listen. Now, very important point. That means if pressure is high in this area due to peristaltic wave, then, and if the spring is loosened, that means if lower esophageal sphincter is loosened with the help of vasoactive intestinal peptide and nitric oxide released from the nerve endings, then the first thing we need to understand is this: for food particles to enter in this second region, the criteria for this is that the pressure in the second region should be low. The pressure in the second region should be low. Now, to maintain a low pressure area, what you need to understand is this: to maintain a low pressure area, volume should be high. That means what? That means this portion, now listen with all your attention, this 50% of the area, this 50% of the area, upper part of the stomach, should what? Increase in volume. Should increase in volume, right? Now, this whole thing, there is an increase in volume of this upper 50% of the stomach, and all these things, that is peristaltic wave, pushing the food into the second region, and the vasoactive intestinal peptide and nitric oxide released from the nerve endings causes the what? Loosening of what? This lower esophageal sphincter. This whole process is called, already, this whole process is known by the name of receptive relaxation. This is called receptive relaxation. It's called receptive relaxation. Now, this receptive relaxation is actually due to this receptive relaxation. This receptive relaxation is actually due to a vagovagal reflex. A vagovagal reflex. Okay, is due to a vagovagal reflex. Okay, that means all the information of this relaxation is, all the afferent information is carried out by vagus nerve, that is cranial nerve number 10, and the afferent information which causes this relaxation also is carried by, this afferent information is also carried by what? Cranial nerve number 10. Clear? That's why this receptive relaxation is a direct product of vagovagal reflex. Okay. Now, after this, what will happen? Suppose after this receptive relaxation, what will happen is this: that suppose the food particles have now entered here. Okay, the food particles have now entered here. Okay, it's very happy. That's why, because it has been received with grand vagovagal reflexes. But a very important point you need to understand here: Listen with all your attention. A very important point here you need to understand is this, that the food particles has now entered this area, right? No doubt about this. Okay, but a very important point here you need to understand is this. Very important point here you need to understand right now is this, that when this food particle has entered this area, what will happen is this, that this food particle will now come down, right, and will be acted upon by what? Gastric juices and all. Now these gastric juices are coming out because of, already Meissner's plexuses which are present in the submucosal layer. Now a very important point here you need to understand is this. Now a very important point will now happen here. You know what is that? The first point is this: the food will now be mixed. The food will now be mixed. Now here is the tough part. Will now be mixed with gastric secretions. Okay, with gastric secretions. Now that means what I am telling is this, that mixing movements will now start in the mixing movements will now start in the mixing movements will now start in this stomach area. Clear? Now very important part here you need to understand again is this, that when this particular food comes into this area of mixing, what happens is this, that this mixing is actually initiated by a very important and specialized cell which is present here near the body. Okay, these cells initiate, now listen with all your attention, these specialized cells which are present in this area, they actually initiate, it is telling something. What is that? It is telling I initiate mixing movements. Okay, now what this cell is doing, it is actually initiating the mixing movements. But how? Now listen with all your attention. These cells actually produces slow waves. These cells actually produces slow waves. Now you know what is slow waves or what are slow waves, right? They produces slow waves. Okay, they produces slow waves. These cells which are present in the body of the stomach, they produces slow waves. And these slow waves now appear in this area, and they will travel as a ring. And come here. Okay, that means when these slow waves are initiated, then a small portion of the stomach will now have contractions. That means they will have a ring like structure here, ring of what, peristalsis or wave. And this ring will actually, now what will happen is this, suppose this is the stomach, and a contractile ring will appear in the stomach, in this area, in the middle part of the body. Now this ring will actually now travel in this area, towards this area. This ring will now travel towards this area. Clear? Towards this area. Okay. Now a very important part you need to understand is this: what is the name of this cell which is actually initiating this mixing movements? The name of this cell is interstitial cells of Kohal. Okay, these are called these are called interstitial cells of Cajal. Okay, Santiago Ramon Cajal, you know, the great person who actually discovered the real structure of, you know, synapse. Okay, now this cell is called interstitial cells of Cajal. Okay, now this interstitial cells of Cajal actually produces slow waves. Okay, they produces slow waves. Okay, this interstitial cells of Cajal produces slow waves. Now this interstitial cell of Cajal which produces slow waves, these slow waves will now, you know, come towards the pyloric area and they will now diminish. Okay, so these slow waves which are generated by interstitial cells of Cajal comes towards the pyloric area and then they diminish. Okay, the rate of productions of the slow wave is 3 to 5 slow waves per minute. Okay, 3 to 5 cycles per minute. 3 to 5 cycles per minute of slow waves are produced. Okay, clear? This slow wave induced muscle contraction of, you know, stomach now approaches the pyloric area. Clear? This ring of contraction now approaches the pyloric area. Clear? Now what is happening here is this, what I was saying I have actually drawn, that is that when these slow waves generate with the help of this, you know, interstitial cells of Cajal, then these slow waves actually travel towards the pyloric area and then they diminish. Okay, now these slow waves are generated at 3 to 5 cycles per minute. Now suppose here is your, you know, food particle. Now what happens is this, when the food particle has just entered the stomach, then what happens is this, the ring is now forming, right? Now suppose here is your food particle. Okay, or suppose, let me tell you that suppose here is your food particle. Now you can very well understand that when these, you know, waves are produced, then these waves are behind. When these waves are at first produced, then these waves are behind the food particles. Okay, but as the food particles move here, these, you know, suppose the food particles have moved from here to here. Okay, now as the time approaches and as the time passes by, then these wave of contraction actually travel faster than the, you know, food particles, and therefore now we can see the wave has actually come in front and the food particles are now present here. Now listen, what happens is this, that when food particles now approaches here, what happens is this, there is what pyloric sphincter. Now this pyloric sphincter closes, and therefore what happens is this, these food particles under the action of these waves, they will, you know, suppose these food particles have come here and these waves are coming here. Now what happens is this, when these waves die, they actually gives out a shock in the other direction. A wave shock in the other direction. That means suppose this is a wave and this wave is hitting this particular wall and these waves are going back like water. Okay. Now due to these food particles are broken into pieces. These food particles are now broken into small pieces. Okay, these food particles are broken into small pieces, and a few food particles, small food particles now enters the small intestine, and the rest goes again to the upside, and then again interstitial cells of Kohal fires. Then again this is, so what is retropulsion? Retropulsion is nothing but a brief. It's a brief. Retropulsion is nothing but a brief backward movement of food particles for proper mixing and breakdown of food. Clear? It is a brief backward movement of food particles for proper mixing and breakdown of food with gastric secretion. Clear? With gastric secretion. Now, what is the most important? This is actually definition. Okay. Now, what is the function? What is the function of this retropulsion? Right. Now, what is the function of this retropulsion? Now listen with all your attention. The most important function of this retropulsion is mechanical breakdown of food, mechanical breakdown of food plus mixing, yes, mixing of food with gastric secretions. Clear? Mechanical breakdown of food plus mixing of food with gastric secretion. This is the function. So this is actually the function. Clear? So this is the definition and this is the function of retropulsion. Now, a very important part you need to understand is this why, what is the real reason behind this retropulsion. Now listen, actually stomach can hold up to 1.5 liters of food, okay, up to 1.5 liters of food, but small intestine is a very small area, right? This so much small, this area is, but this small intestine therefore cannot hold this much amount of food. Therefore, so that maximum amount of food retains in the stomach and 1.5 liters of food should never enter the stomach, should never enter the small intestine at a time. To prevent this, retropulsion is a very, very effective way. Clear? Retropulsion is a very, very effective way. Why? Because when retropulsion occurs, some amount, a little amount of food from this 1.5 liters of food actually enters small intestine. Okay? Now, why I am telling liters? Right? It is a unit of volume. Now, listen. When we take food, we take fluids and all these things, and when they are actually mixed with several secretions from our own body and from fluids we intake, therefore this whole solid or liquid, whatever it is, the food is converted into a semi-solid paste, and therefore it is called liters. Okay. Now Therefore, retropulsion, what I was speaking is, retropulsion is very important so that the entire amount of food should not, pass on to the what? Small intestine. So that, because it can damage the small intestine, because small intestine is a very much small area and it cannot hold 1.5 liters of food at a time. Okay, clear? Next, we will be talking about the movements of, small intestine. Small intestinal motility is this, that this topic is actually really complex. Okay, because many problems occur because of these, disorders of small intestinal motility. Okay. Now, before we start this, you must understand that actually the small intestine, the small intestine is divisible into three main parts, right? Three main parts, and they are duodenum, number 2 jejunum, number 3 ileum. Okay, number 1 duodenum, number 2 jejunum, and number 3 ileum. Now the first point you need to understand is this, that almost the small intestine, the entire length of small intestine actually is around 6 meters. Okay, the entire length of small intestine is about 6 meters. The whole length of small intestine is 6 meters. Okay, now how this 6 meter of small intestine is divisible into duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. Around 0.3 meter is taken by duodenum. Okay, jejunum takes around 2.3 meters. Okay, and 3.4 meters of length is taken by ileum. Clear? Okay, 0.3 meter is taken by duodenum, 2.3 meter is taken by jejunum, and 3.4 meters is actually taken by ileum. Okay, clear? Now, a very important part you need to understand here is this, that whenever we are talking about these three things, okay, we must understand this very basic thing, that is, that whenever we are talking about jejunum and all, okay, now listen, suppose this is your, entry point of stomach. Okay, this is suppose your entry point of stomach. This is suppose your entry point of stomach. Now listen with all your attention. This is what? This C-shaped part is the duodenum, right? This C-shaped part is the duodenum, and here we have got, what is this? This is what? This is the spring which we were talking about. This is what? This is pyloric sphincter, right? Now listen with all your attention. Now, a very important point here we need to understand is this, that in this area, that is in the duodenal part of the small intestine, there are some cells present called eye cells. Okay, there are some cells which are called eye cells. Okay, these are eye cells. Now listen with all your attention. These eye cells are very important. Why? Because these eye cells, in response to fatty meals, these eye cells release into the these eye cells release a very, very important hormone. Okay, why we are talking about this hormone, we'll talk about that later, don't worry. Now, in response to fatty meals, okay, that is meal containing high amount of fats, this cell releases a hormone into the bloodstream. Okay, this releases a hormone into the bloodstream called cholecystokinin. Okay, cholecystokinin or CCK in short. Clear? Cholecystokinin or CCK. Okay, now this CCK, what it does is, now listen, Now this CCK, what it does is actually this CCK is made up of, now listen, the CCK is actually a protein, okay? The CCK is actually made up of protein, and now a very important point you need to understand is this, a basic biochemistry of, this CCK is this, that CCK is actually made up of, many number of amino acids, okay? But the active form of CCK is CCK8. The active form of CCK, but the active form of CCK is CCK8, okay? That means what? That means, what do you mean by the active form of CCK? That means this form, that is CCK8, this CCK8 is the most abundant in our body. Clear? Okay? Why this CCK8 is termed like that? Why it is called CCK8? That means it has got 8 amino acids, okay? It has got 8 amino acids. Now listen with all your attention. It has got 8 amino acids, okay? Clear? It has got 8 amino acids. Okay, this is amino acid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, now listen. Suppose this is the, suppose this is the N terminal, okay, and this is the C terminal. This is the N terminal and this is the C terminal, okay. Now a very important point here we need to understand is this, that when we are talking about CCK, there are 8 amino acids present. Now listen, actually CCK contains many more amino acids. Now listen, actually the pre-pro cholecystokinin is made up of actually 150 amino acids. Now listen, this pre-pro CCK is actually made up of 150 amino acids. Like insulin, these pre-pro cholecystokinin are also broken down. This pre-pro cholecystokinin are also broken down, and they are broken into many fragments, okay. One of the fragment is called CCK34. That means in this segment 34 amino acids are present. But the most active form of CCK is CCK8, okay. The most active form of CCK is CCK8, okay. That means in this CCK8 form there are 8 amino acids present. There are 8 amino acids present. Now a very important point here we need to understand is this, that is, this out of this 8 amino acids in the active form of CCK, the 7th amino acid is very important. Now why this 7th amino acid is very important? Because in all the form of CCK, in all the forms of CCK, that is whether it is CCK34, CCK8, or there are many other forms, okay. Whether it is there are many other forms of CCK. Let me tell you that there are not, sorry, this is not 34, sorry, this is not 34, this is CCK33, and there are many other forms. There are CCK38, there are CCK59, these are the various different forms of active CCKs. Now listen, out of these 4 active CCK, the most abundant and the most important one in our body is CCK8, okay. The most important and the most abundant one is our CCK8. Now a very important point you need to understand is this, whether it is CCK33 or whether it is a CCK8 or whether it is a CCK38 or whether it is a CCK59, you must understand this right now, that the 7th amino acid in all these active forms of CCK never changes. Clear? The 7th amino acid in all these active form never changes. The 7th amino acid in all these active forms never changes, and the 7th amino acid is tyrosine. The 7th amino acid is tyrosine. Clear? This is the single letter code Y, right? Tyrosine. Now listen with all your attention. Now the 7th amino acid, which is a tyrosine, let me draw tyrosine like this, because tyrosine is a benzene containing amino acid, right? It's a benzene containing amino acid, therefore let me draw a benzene here, okay? Clear? As it is a benzene containing amino acid, now listen with all your attention possible. As this, as the seventh amino acid is a tyrosine molecule, you must understand this, that this tyrosine molecule is sulfated, is attached to sulfur, is sulfated. Tyrosine, you know, tyrosine molecule present in CCK forms, CCK isoforms are all sulfated. That means they are attached to a sulfur molecule. Clear? They are all sulfated. Clear? They are all sulfated. Clear? Now, why this sulfur is important? It is said that when this sulfur is removed, then the biological activity of this tyrosine is reduced. Then the biological activity of this CCK is reduced. That means this sulfur is important because of its biological activity. Okay? Now listen. Sulfur in CCK is important because of its, because it, you know, it increases the biological activity of CCK. Okay? Sulfur in CCK is important because it increases the biological activity of CCK itself. Okay? Increases the biological activity of CCK itself. Clear? Am I clear to everyone? Okay? Clear? Now listen with all your attention. This was, you know, short biochemistry of CCK. We will be discussing in great details about CCK when we will be talking about endocrinology. Okay? Now listen. Now the very important point you need to understand here is this, that means, now listen with all your attention. The functional part, now listen, this tyrosine is present in the carboxyl end or near to the amino end. This tyrosine, the functional, you know, tyrosine is present in the carboxyl end or in the amino end. It is present in the carboxyl terminal. That means this carboxyl terminal is therefore called the functional terminal. This carboxyl terminal, therefore, in CCK is called the functional terminal. Okay? It's called functional terminal. Clear? It's called functional terminal. Clear? It's called functional terminal. Now, another important point you need to understand is this with respect to its function. Okay? Now, what are the functions of CCK, you know, enzymes? CCK hormone. Now, listen with all your attention. If you want to talk about CCK hormone function, the first thing you need to understand is this, that the first thing you need to understand is this, that CCK are released from eye cells, right? Eye cells. Now listen with all your attention. What are eye cells? Eye cells are nothing but specialized epithelial cells, specialized intestinal epithelial cells, therefore eye cells, intestinal. Okay, there are specialized intestinal cells or intestinal epithelial cells which have the power to secrete cholecystokinin. That's it. Clear? They have special power only to secrete cholecystokinin. That's it. Now, a very important point you need to understand is this, that we have already discussed the role of CCK in, you know, pancreatic secretion. Why? Because CCK actually goes to what? Goes to acinar cells of pancreas and activates the, you know, pancreatic secretions from acini, right? Now, a very important point here you need to understand is this, that when we are talking about the motility, now CCK also has an important motility function. You know what is that? Now listen, what happens is this, that CCK actually, when present in the blood, actually inhibits CCK, when present in the blood, inhibits inhibits gastric motility, inhibits gastric motility. Clear? Inhibits gastric motility. Now listen with all your attention. That means what it does is, what CCK does is, CCK inhibits the, CCK inhibits the churning activity of what? The churning and propulsive and mixing activities of what? Stomach. Okay. Now my question is how CCK does these things. Now how CCK actually inhibits this, GI tract motility, sorry, gastric motility. This is in itself a topic which should be discussed, under many big headings, but we will try to make it as short as possible. Now listen, the best way for you to understand how CCK does this thing is this. CCK actually have two, effects. Okay, let me, draw a bigger one. What happens is this, how CCK, now my question is, how CCK or cholecystokinin inhibits gastric motility. Now, very, very important part you need to understand here is this, that there is no, easy answer to this question. There is not a single easy answer to this question. Question is really, and the answer is really, tough. Then the tough part you need to deal with right now. This is the question. Now, answer. Now, the answer lies here that number one, CCK relaxes fundus of stomach. Fundus of stomach. Now, I will be drawing the diagrams here, okay? Now, this is, fundus, right? Sorry, this is the fundus area. This is the fundus area. Now, what CCK does is, CCK actually, increases the volume of what? The fundus area, the fundic area. Okay. Now, a very, very important part we need to understand here is this. Suppose this was the early, this was, early part. Now, the very important part you need to understand is this. When the fundus area of the stomach is relaxed, then more food will be, present here, because more area or more volume is present, or more volume is available right now. Therefore, this is one of the way by which, CCK inhibits gastric motility. Okay. Another thing it does is, it actually helps in contraction of, of pyloric sphincter. It helps in the contraction of pyloric sphincter. Clear? It helps in the contraction of pyloric sphincter. When this pyloric sphincter is contracted, when this spring contracts, or pyloric sphincter contracts, then food cannot move from here to here, right? It cannot move, right? Therefore, food will have to, stay in the stomach itself. Clear? Now, another thing you need to understand is this. There are not much, evidence available for this statement right now, which I am going to write. But some scientists believe that CCK, this hormone, reduces another thing, that is the powerful contraction of stomach. Also reduces contraction of stomach. Clear? Clear? So these are the three ways by which CCK inhibits gastric motility. So these are the three ways by which CCK inhibits gastric motility. Clear? Now, a very, very important point you need to understand is this, that suppose this is a cell, okay? Suppose this is a cell, okay? And this cell will be, affected by CCK. Suppose this is a cell and CCK8, the most, biologically active form of CCK, will now try to act here in this cell. Now, the first thing you need to understand is this. What happens is this, that CCK have two types of receptors, okay? Clear? There are two types of receptor present, okay? CCK receptors are of two types, CCKA and CCKB. Now listen with all your attention. CCKB receptors are present in stomach and brain, okay? CCKB receptors are present in stomach and brain, and CCKA receptors are present in your pancreas. Clear? So there are two receptors for CCK present there. Number one is CCKA and CCKB. Now listen with all your attention. All these CCK receptors are coupled to G proteins. That means what? That means they are GPCRs. Clear? They are all GPCRs. That is CCKA and CCKB. All of them are what? GPCRs. Clear? G protein coupled receptors. Okay. Now, in most of the cases, I'm not telling always, in most of the cases, suppose this is CCKA receptor, CCKA in pancreas, CCKA is coupled to GS. Okay. Sorry. CCKA is coupled to GQ. Okay. Therefore, increases the, secretion of pancreatic acinar cells specifically. Which hormone actually is helpful in, releasing HCO3 minus from pancreas? That is secretin, right? Okay. Clear? So this is the basic of CCK. Why I have told CCK right now? Why I have finished this problem? Because CCK is one of the hormone which is produced by small intestine and which also helps in motility of stomach. Okay, which also helps in motility of stomach. Okay. Now another non-motile function of CCK, what is that? It increases the what? Pancreatic secretion from acinar cells. Okay, it helps in the activation of acinar cells of pancreas so that pancreatic secretions increases. Okay, that's why CCK was earlier known as pancreozymin. That means it increases or activates the pancreas. Okay, now we will be talking about the small intestinal motility proper. Okay, now we will be talking about the small intestinal motility proper. Listen. Now, the first point we need to understand when we are talking about the small intestinal motility is this, that small intestinal motility actually occurs because of small intestine movements, right? Now, a very, very important point you need to understand here, that is there are two types of movements present in the small intestine, which are occurring in the small intestine. There are two types of movements occurring in the small intestine. Okay. Number one is segmentation, okay, which is also called mixing movement. Okay. Another one is called, the second one is called propulsive, which helps in the propulsion of food. Okay. Propulsive. Clear? Propulsion of food. Okay. So these are the two movements. Now listen. First we will be talking about the segmentation. Okay. Then we will be talking about the propulsive movements. Okay.